welcome to Beebe Book Buzz. We have a special edition today we call our Fireside Chats. And it's one of two programs that we do in the year. One is Fireside and the other is Beach Reads, where we each produce, all of the gang of librarians that we've got here today, each produce a list, a themed list that gives you suggestions on that particular theme. And these are themes that are kind of close to our hearts in one way or another. So today we are going to each talk about a little bit about our list, and then we're going to talk one book from that list. And so if you find a list that you're interested in, you're more than welcome. We have the lists, the actual paper lists at the library that you can come and pick up, and there's a display of books from those lists. So if you want to take notes, everybody's going to introduce themselves. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves first, and then talk a little bit about their lists, and then one book from that list. So here we go with Fireside, starting with Bridget.
All right, my name is Bridget. I'm a reference librarian, and my list is There's No Business Like Show Business, which is nonfiction and fiction about Hollywood. We're a little bit past the Oscars, but is there any time when it's not appropriate to think about Hollywood?
No, never.
So the book that I'm going to talk about today is called Five Came Back by Mark Harris. It is a chronicle of when Hollywood went to war in World War II. He follows five directors, John Ford, John Huston, William Wyler, George Stevens, and Frank Capra, who are some of the most well-known directors in Hollywood history and were at the height of their fame when they decided to join the war effort. Harris explores their different reasons for serving. Ford and Huston were largely looking for adventure. Stevens was looking for meaning beyond his Hollywood career. And Capra and Wyler both had a sense of duty to the nation they had chosen to call home. You learn a lot of sort of interesting little facts. One that you learn in here is that Capra, when he went to join the army, discovered that he was not actually an American citizen. He had come here from Italy as a child. And so in order to enlist in the army, he had to become a citizen, even though he had been living here and working here for decades at that point. So Harris places each chapter geographically and chronologically, which makes it easy to track the directors as they move through the war. They are in both the Pacific and Atlantic theaters, so they're in Europe and the Pacific, and it goes pretty much the entire timeline, so you really move around a lot.
Bridget, does he include maps?
He does a few, not very many. There are pictures of the directors and sort of some of the places that they went to in here. His thorough use of historical sources means this book is accurate, but it never feels like a dry recounting of facts. He's very engaging and informative writer. He's a journalist for Vanity Fair in addition to writing these. So you get kind of a journalistic style, but a very in-depth research and very well-researched and deep look at it. At points, this book is an adventure story, starring at war, a Hollywood insider story, and a bracing account of real-world horrors. One of these directors was present at the liberation of Dachau, which he filmed, for which material was later used during the Nuremberg trials. Just obviously made quite an impact on his life.
Yeah.
So Harris explores this period not as an interruption in Hollywood careers, but rather as a formative experience which shaped the rest of their careers and their lives. The director who was present at Dachau was George Stevens, who was perhaps the most changed, obviously, by that experience. He had previously made mostly light comedies, and after that, he never made another comedy again, so you can see. So Harris demonstrates that these men are not just emblematic of the Hollywood war experience, but the war experience for the entire nation in that, and you can see how Hollywood influenced the depiction of the war as it was happening, not just as we see now post the war.
So, and you said it was journalistic in style.
In
but
style,
is it,
yes.
Would you say it's like good narrative nonfiction? Is it easy to turn the pages? It tells a story.
You're following each of them sort of on a story, which is why it kind of breaks up at times.
Right.
But it's definitely narrative nonfiction and really pulls you through. And he's very good at ending chapters at points where you're going, I need to read what's next.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
Is it chronological for each director?
It is chronological for the war, so it jumps between directors. So you do follow each story in order, but you will maybe spend 3 months with Capra, 4 months with Weiler,
Right.
6
Oh,
months
that's
with Ford, and so they kind of overlap, and they made each other at times too.
Oh, they did?
I was
Oh,
wondering
okay.
if they ever actually worked together. on
Had
some
they
of these
known
things.
each other? Some of them known each other before? I mean, I
Yes.
guess they probably all kind of knew each other. But
Yes, absolutely. And well, coming out of the war, Weiler, Capra, and Stevens decided to make a film company together. It's Liberty Bell Films is what they made. Now best known, probably you've seen the logo every Christmas because one of the only films that actually was made under the logo was It's a Wonderful Life, Capra's Great Return. So you see, so when you watch it on television and there's that Liberty Bell right before
Yep.
It's a Wonderful Life, he made this after the war.
Okay. Okay.
Who was the director? of that one?
Capra.
Right, of course. All right, now moving on to the mustard side of the couch. This is what we've got. We got
Middle
Alyssa.
mustard. Hi, my name is Alyssa. I work in the technical services department at Beebe. My list is not your average ghost story. So when you think about ghost stories, you think about a campfire and scaring your friends and things that go bump in the night, but this list is not about that. So there are books that are either just inspired by ghosts or the plot is propelled by a ghost story. They all involve ghosts or ghost stories in some way, but I wouldn't say there's like an actively frightening book on the list. So I'm a horror reader, but I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, so don't be scared of this list just because of the word ghost. It's not your average ghost story. It's a good list. I do say so myself.
Say so herself.
I would agree.
Thank you. This book that I'll talk about today is Mr. Splitfoot by Samantha Hunt. So the book revolves around 2 teenage orphans, Nat and Ruth. And when we meet them, they're living under the care of a violent and just cold-hearted man that calls himself the Father. The Father has this kind of rural home for orphans, but really he just takes them in for their state aid money. So really not out of the kindness of his heart, we'll say. So Nat and Ruth are orphans. They begin talking to the dead to make a few bucks off of their fellow orphans who want to talk to their families.
Yeah.
It sounds bleak, but it's good. It's fine. It brings
Not
comfort.
giving anything
You were
away.
about to spoil it, right?
I know. Gosh, it's like a story of my life. It gives comfort to all. They make a few dollars. They get wrapped up in the orbit of a local con man named Mr. Bell. So he hears about what they can do and wants to take advantage of that. So they kind of run off with Mr. Bell, and they embark on a perilous adventure filled with a hidden treasure and cult leaders and just these fantastical stories along the way. The book operates on 2 different timelines. So you have Nat and Ruth and Mr. Bell in one. And you also have a timeline. It kind of goes back and forth chapter to chapter. You have a timeline that is following Ruth's older sister, Elle. So Elle was also at the father's home with Ruth, but aged out at 18 because they don't get money anymore, so the father kicks them out. So Elle had to leave and promised to go back for Ruth, who was much younger at that point, but Elle ended up getting pregnant with a daughter and couldn't take care of her sister and her new baby. So fast forward, Elle's daughter Cora, so this is Ruth's niece. You all with me?
Yeah.
Ruth's niece. Okay.
You lost me, but keep going.
Okay. We'll talk after, it's fine. So Ruth, one of our orphans in the timeline, now has a niece named Cora, who is a young woman herself and now pregnant with her first child. So Ruth, one night, comes to Cora and beckons her to follow her. She doesn't say where they're going. She doesn't give anything away. She just wants Cora to come with her. She needs to show her something. And Cora, having always wanted to know her aunt and always hearing stories about her aunt, decides, okay, I'm single. I'm going to be a mother. This is my last adventure. I'm going to follow my aunt that I never knew. So there they go. And soon Ruth's past, in the other timeline, starts catching up to them in this one. So Ruth's old, treasure hunting adventure starts to come into our new adventure. If you can't, it's fun, but if you can't tell, it's hard to describe.
Yeah.
It's an unconventional story. The pace keeps you reading. It ends each chapter on little cliffhangers. It really does make you want to, not put it down, even if you're a little confused. The characters are really authentic. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are good and bad, but you kind of care about all of them, no matter where on the spectrum they fall. They're just really well done and believable. The timelines, though I made it seem really confusing, they're really seamless. Each one enhances the other, so it's not difficult to go back and forth. But I did think about, while reading this, I thought of this book as a puzzle I was putting together without having seen what it's going to look like. So I could feel myself working out the mystery, but I didn't even really know what the crime was that I was figuring out. So it's
So
a little.
You really have to kind of just suspend all your judgment and let it
Right.
flow. It's one of those books.
Trust the author.
Right.
She knows what she's doing.
Right. That's
In
good.
the end, there's a very clear picture, and I thought it was a really interesting literary experience.
Right.
For people who are into quirky characters and maybe a little mysticism. But yes, this is one of my ghost stories.
Mr. Splitfoot.
Mr. Splitfoot. Yes.
Alrighty.
I'm Jeff from the reference department, and
Yes,
my
you are.
list this year is actually not so much about individual titles, but more about people. I'm doing the world's best travel writers. So my list actually, it's all nonfiction, of course, and it's a mix of sort of famous 19th and a lot of early 20th century people, and also people right up to today, like people who are still writing, like Bill Bryson, Anthony Bourdain, who just died a couple of years ago. So there's a mix of people from different eras that I think will appeal to a broad range of interests. And so rather than focus on specific titles, I've kind of tried to talk about each person and what their travel writing was about. And I've highlighted one or two of their most famous works that you might want to try. And today I'm going to talk about one of my personal favorites. And in fact, it's so much of a personal favorite that I own my own first edition because it's probably one of my favorite books. Those of you who remember Charlotte Thompson, who was my predecessor in the job at Beebe Library, she turned me on to Rebecca West, Dame Rebecca West, who was born in 1892 as Cicely Isabel Fairfield, but she changed her name to be the name of a character in an Ibsen play, because why wouldn't you? She was very, very famous, not just for her writing. She was a journalist, an essayist. She wrote a lot of fiction. She wrote a lot of nonfiction. But she also was very famous for her personal life because she had a marriage with, actually, now I'm forgetting, was she married? No, she was never married. She had a 10-year affair with H.G. Wells, and they had a son together. She also dated Charlie Chaplin, so she was kind of one of those quirky people in that time period. And she was one of those very, there were a whole bunch of people like her who were sort of quirky British women who went off to exotic destinations on camels. Yes. And I love
That should be the name of your list.
That should be the name of my list. Well, they're not all women and they're not all on camels, but and actually, so the book that I'm talking about is called Black Lamb and Gray Falcon, and it is considered by many people to be the best nonfiction book of the 20th century. Wow. That's debatable. I would certainly rank it very high up there myself. And it's long. I don't want people to be intimidated by that, because it does.
That's not the only
Because this is only
version.
half of it, actually. It is quite long, but I would like to encourage people, even if you don't really want to actually tackle it from start to finish, it's the kind of book where, because it is a travel diary and it covers about a 6-week period where she and her husband, not H.G. Wells, a man she was actually married to, traveled through Yugoslavia in the late 30s, right before the Nazis invaded Poland, and then started a whole, and Yugoslavia followed shortly afterwards. So it was written at a sort of pivotal point in history, And her writing is fantastic, and you can actually dip into little parts of it, and if there was some part of that area that you were particularly interested in, you could just read that section. But I think it would be well worth it to get a sense of what her writing style was like and what her sense of quirkiness and adventure was.
She's funny.
She is funny. She's really funny, but she's writing about very serious topics, but it's also a travel journal, so amazing things happen. George Bernard Shaw said of her that she could handle a pen as brilliantly as I ever could, and much more savagely. And there's a lot of her sort of the way she interprets other cultures and the people that she encounters along the way
Did
is
she
like.
intend it to be like published, or did she start it as a journal and then it took shape?
Well,
as
she was a writer, so
She was a writer,
yeah,
but I
she was
mean-
already a published writer. So I don't think there was ever any
Question that it would.
not be published. But it wasn't published until a few years after the actual period of traveling took place.
So when you
It
say
didn't get
she's-
published
her-
until 41.
Sounds like her writing's very sharp. I always think of Dorothy Parker.
If you enjoy that kind of barbed Dorothy Parker wit or Edith Wharton, that kind of stuff.
The Mitfords.
Yes, exactly. They're all of the same type, and I'm going to read you a couple of quick quotes just to give you an idea. But it is a very narrative style, and like Karen said, it is funny. She travels with her husband, but also one of the main characters is a man who she fictionalizes as Constantine. He was actually a real person, a Jewish Serbian poet that they actually meet and traveled with, but she turns him into she gives him a pseudonym in the book. And his wife, who is a German woman named Greta, is absolutely insufferable. And if you've ever traveled with someone you wanted to push down a flight of stairs, it's Greta. So this is all mixed into the insightful commentary about history and so forth. I do want to read you a couple of quick quotes to give you an idea of what her writing style is like. One of my favorite sentences in all of literature is when she goes to visit in northern Serbia, she goes to visit a bunch of monasteries, medieval monasteries, Byzantine monasteries actually. And she says, the gardens were mystifying. Inside the beautifully tended box hedges, the flower beds were choked with weeds. A single garden chair made of white painted wire in the Victorian fashion was set quite alone on a wide gravel space with an air of deluded sociability, as if it had gone mad and thought that there were about it many other garden chairs.
So fantastic.
And she talks a lot about the people that she meets along the way, and she has a comment about a woman at some hotel. She was one of those widows whose majesty makes their husbands seem especially dead. So that gives you a little bit of the flavor. I'll just also finish by telling you what the title means, because that's kind of a little bit, people kind of wonder where does she get the title. The Black Lamb refers to a sacrifice that she saw in a small village, which a lot of the book is about sacrifice and atonement in what she sees in those cultures. And so the idea of sacrificing an innocent creature in order to provide more fecundity in the future just kind of is something that she can't get her mind around. And the Gray Falcon refers to a Serbian legend about how a prince of Serbia way back in the 1300s made a bargain where a falcon came down, and if he chose, he could choose in this battle to either lose the battle and have immortality for his society, or win the battle and have his society end. And he chose immortality, which is another very important part of the whole Serbian psyche. So if you're interested in the Balkans and you like that kind of witticism, it's monumental, but I would really encourage people to try it. And if you're still intimidated, I'll just point out that there is a fantastic, much shorter biography of her that's also really great if you want to get a sense of what her life was like.
Does it have a lot of quotes? 'Cause
Yes.
I'm in it for the quotes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, the
That
writings.
would be a great way to learn a little bit about her without being quite so intense.
Well,
Right.
it's funny that it's smaller than her book.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, and that's only one.
She has a lot to say.
she has a lot to say.
Okay, so yes, mine from the sublime to slightly ridiculous. My list is called, I'm Karen, and my list is called The Many Faces of Funny. And I'm going to steal a little phrase from a really, famous to us, Reader's Advisory librarian, who calls these kinds of books that are on my list smart funny. I can't remember now if it's funny smart or smart funny, but anyway, you get the idea. They're not just funny. There's something a little. They all have something there's a little more depth to them. That there's a little more going on than just slapstick comedy or whatever. So so there's a kind of a wide range. Some of them are dark comedy. Some of them are more rom-com-y. And the whole everything in between. So that's my list. And this one that I want to talk today is called The Flatshare by Beth O'Leary. And the question is, what happens when you're a seriously underpaid editor living in seriously overpriced London, and your ex-boyfriend finally kicks you out of the flat that you've been sharing with him, and you have a choice. You either take the place with the mushrooms growing under the sink, or you decide to share a one-bedroom, including the bed, with a guy who you'll never see because he works nights and is away on the weekends. So those are the choices. Of course, the story goes because Tiffy the main character makes the choice to pick the Flatshare. And Tiffy is a book editor whose top-selling title is Crochet Your Way, and is about to become a runaway bestseller. It's gone viral. It's very exciting.
I have it on my list to buy.
And the guy
Jackie
Leon,
will be book talking now.
the guy Leon, who is her flatmate, is a night nurse at a hospice, sorry, and this is their story, and it's told in alternating chapters of his and hers voices. Classic romance, yep, and she does a very good job of, you always know whose chapter you're in because she develops the characters very well. And because it's a romance, you can only imagine the shenanigans of these two who, because of their schedules, don't even meet for the first third or more of the book. They don't even lay eyes on each other. But they start this hilarious kind of Post-it note correspondence, which basically sort of threatens to cover the flat in this tide of yellow sticky notes. And so the Post-it notes kind of make it a thoroughly modern version of an epistolary romance. And if you don't remember what epistolary means, it means told through letters. So these are kind of bite-sized letters. They're not real letters, and they aren't the only. I won't say that the whole book is full of Post-it notes. That's not what it is. But they do play a big role in advancing the storyline and telling us about the relationship as it grows. And that relationship, again, in the time-honored tradition of all romances, is, the love story kind of sneaks up on them. Of course, we, as the readers, are a little more aware ahead of time. But if that were all that was going on in the book, then it would be kind of thin. It would be just your average romance. But there's a lot more going on that makes me want to recommend it to you. And the rest of what's going on is this very hilarious supporting cast and supporting secondary plot lines. So we hear about Leon's life as a dedicated hospice nurse, and we become involved with some of his stories of the patients that he works with. We meet Kate, his girlfriend. We meet his brother, who has been, his family believes, wrongly imprisoned, and so his storyline plays quite a big part in Tiffy and Leon's. There's the villain of the piece on Tiffy's side, who is her gorgeous ex-boyfriend, Justin, who's you just love to hate. But actually, that storyline is actually part of what gives depth to this otherwise, light romance. Tiffy's best friends, Gertie and Mo, and then all the scenes of Tiffy in her working life where she's trying to promote this Crochet Your Way and make it the next big thing, which are really funny. So all of that together with the main storyline kind of, it creates this story that really kind of hums along with a lot of fun and laughs and interest. So I would definitely highly recommend this to anybody, especially people who love British romances, anything from Jane Austen all the way to Bridget Jones's Diary. I mean, not just the British setting and the British sense of humor, there's that, but there's the he's mildly brooding, I would call him hero. He's not like in the depths of despair or anything. But he's
His post-its are like two
he
sentences.
writes
and hers are
really
like
hers are like
paragraphs.
16 post-its and his are like 2 lines. Yeah, but anyway, that's the kind of guy that in those in romances is he's just waiting for the right girl to come along and bring him out of himself.
I have a practical question. Do they change the sheets?
Th-
Do they
that,
have 2 sets
that
of
is
sheets?
an issue that comes up, and I'm not going to tell you how
Okay,
they
so
resolve
we'll have to read it to
you
find
have
out
to
how
find
that
out.
happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
I loved how they described her outfits.
Oh yeah, she
dresses just,
Tiffy is like the ultimate.
and she's very tall.
I think of her as a librarian. I mean, she just
Yeah.
wears like these crazy cool outfits that just sound really awesome. Anyway, not.
So they describe the outfit?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
In black, clearly.
Yes, mustard and black. She does just wear mustard and
knows
black.
what's in style.
to her character is that it's a part of her, which is that she's a very bold
She's
and
very striking. I
and
think
like
she's
out there.
tall
Yeah,
and
she's
red.
Yeah, she's tall and yeah. So anyway, a really great escape for a winter weekend by the fire, The Flatshare by Beth O'Leary.
Great.
They will make you feel nice.
It does make you feel nice. Yeah, I've read a lot of these this winter. It's been very helpful.
Oh, you want me to talk?
I want you to talk now.
My list this year. I'm
This is
Jackie.
Jackie.
I'm from administration. My list was essays. So essays, which is exactly what it sounds. They were all a little bit different, but this one was the most different. Some were political, some were a little more humorous, but this was the most interesting one on my list, I think. And it's called Little Weirds by Jenny Slate. It was weird.
Just a little.
Just a little bit. But she's best known as an actress. She does some stand-up comedy. She's oddly written 2 children's picture books, which I didn't know about. But this is her first adult novel, and she's semi-local. She's from Milton. Lives in LA now with the movie people. So this was her first adult work, and it's calling it a collection of essays. It just doesn't do it justice. It's just so much more than that, and not even that. It's like she took all the random thoughts in her head and just sort of harnessed them all together and then brought them to life. The imagery that she uses is so vivid, it's almost cinematic. It's like you're watching flowers bloom, and like it's just dazzling. I thought her writing was really striking. Surprisingly so. I mean, when you watch her stand up, you understand that she's quite bright, but this is a different skill.
People are different on paper.
Yeah, it's really different. But you get this view into her life, the way she sees everything, the way she sees the world, how creative she is, how introspective she is about everything. Everything is really just bursting from the page. I mean, it just jumps out at you. You can feel her energy and how deeply she feels about everything. She doesn't seem to feel casually about anything. Like everything is like intense. She really vacillates from this kind of exuberance about life to kind of a very profound sadness about things. Like everything seems to hit her very hard. But what is it about? Aren't I always talking to you about books that are about nothing? And this one is still that. It's about everything and nothing. It's about being born in the spring and divorce and ghosts, and she's always thinking about her death, and there's her dogs in it all the time. The dog's a running theme. But her writing is just so beautiful that you want to savor everything, even when it's kind of insane.
Seinfeld.
It's like Seinfeld. Yes. All the things you're thinking, she's saying them out loud. But really beautifully, like nicely, more nice. I mean,
The way you
better
wish
than you would
were
say.
saying them.
Yes,
You
exactly.
had read us some quotes from
Yes.
her, and I was amazed how you expect a stand-up comedian to be just sort of, funny and.
Yeah, and it's
But
not.
it was really like beautiful writing.
Very eloquent. It's a really personal book. It feels like she wrote it for her, and that it didn't matter if it got published. This was like her therapy, and she just needed to get these things out there. And some of it's really light. She has this one chapter that's just questions like, who's chattier, a bird or a squirrel? Things you wonder. But then the next chapter, she's watching a documentary about the Code of Hammurabi and like having all these thoughts about misogyny and her experience in the world as a woman, and it gets deep fast. But it's so much more. So I do want to read that, just like 2 quotes, because I really think it captures kind of her essence. This was called I Was Born, About to Bust. I was born on the boundary line between cold and hot, at the intersection of the 2 elements that make up a clap of thunder. I was born at the time of year when the sun wants to warm the earth, but the winter has frozen it almost to the point of permanent frigidity. I was born when living things remember to wake up again. I was born just when you think that birth won't happen because it's been cold for so long. Like, she's just a really good writer. So it's one of those books that I kind of want to own, because I think you could dip into it and just, I don't think I actually read it in order.
You don't need to.
And you
it feels
don't
like
need
a book
to.
you could have by your bedside and just pick
Just
up and
read a sentence.
and read a few
Yeah.
sentences and then put down again.
If you need a little perspective.
Yeah.
Maybe she followed the squirrel and the
Bird.
bird with the Hammurabi, because maybe it depends on whether it's a male squirrel or a female squirrel.
Maybe. It's very much worth reading just for the creativity. I mean, just to see how someone else sees everything,
Yeah.
particularly nature. She has a lot of nature
Yeah,
that I
that
thought was
sounds
really
good.
beautiful. So that was Jenny Slate.
All right.
Little weirds.
And we need to move on.
Okay, so my name is Beth Radcliffe, and I'm one of the reference librarians. And my list is books that have either just come out or are about to be published.
Fiction.
Fiction, absolutely.
Just so we're clear.
Right. So the one I'm going to talk about today is These Ghosts Are Family by Maisy Card, and it's due out this Tuesday, March 3rd. So this is not the book. I put a cover on it. So it's a debut novel, and it's breathtaking in its scope and unconventional in its telling. It's a family saga told from multiple characters' perspectives and takes place both in Jamaica and in the boroughs of New York. So this is how it begins. Let's say you are a 69-year-old Jamaican man called Stanford, or Stan for short, who once faked your own death. Intriguing, right? The whole first chapter is like that. It asks the question, let's say, from different characters' points of view. So I really loved that chapter. It's really cool. From there, she continues the storytelling in a more traditional sense, following different family members. The non-traditional aspect is that it's told from the ancestors' point of view. It's told from the current character's point of view. It goes back to slavery in the 1700s in Jamaica and to present day in both Jamaica and New York. And the other non-conventional thing is it's not told in chronological order, which can be confusing, but she does such a good job that it flows through. Oh, and I can't show you because this is not the right book, but it does have a handy family tree in the beginning to help you figure out which character is
That helps
talking
a
now.
lot, especially
Yeah.
with a non-chronological
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
So the novel thoughtfully explores the way each character wrestles with their family ghosts and their
Don't take culture ghosts, you guys.
but there are also no physical ghosts, as much as a ghost could be physical.
Ghosts, ghosts actually aren't physical, Beth, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I think she gets that.
Are you sure?
Beg to differ.
So each of these characters struggle to forge an independent identity from the family and also from all their trauma that they've gone through. The various voices allow you to see the same characters through multiple points of view. So the unreliable narrator
Right.
thing again.
So does that make it kind of almost a mystery of sorts?
It's not really a mystery.
No.
No. Well, there is a little bit of a mystery throughout it.
I mean, I always think when you
That's-
have unreliable narrators, there's a sort of a little bit of a mystery because you're always wondering,
Yeah,
is what
they're-
they're telling me true or
really
not?
is.
She doesn't tell you a lot. Like that he starts out with that's not his real name.
Right.
That does get resolved pretty quickly, but there are other things that come up. So you're like,
Little mysteries.
yeah, what went on there? What was going on? So yeah, that is true. So Maisy Card, the author, she does a great job of drawing Jamaica and the boroughs of New York. She really makes you feel like it's not just the physical setting, but you feel the cultural too. So you feel like you're living in Jamaica or you're being Jamaican. You're really inhabiting what it is to be Jamaican, which is such a cool skill to be able to do.
Is there a lot of dialect in it?
There's a lot of a good amount of dialect, which can be off-putting. Some people find it really off-putting, and it did slow me down. You have to. It's not as easy as some other dialects, but I feel like it gave it a really good. It felt more natural. I was able to be in Jamaica more with that, because that's the way they talk there. So I really appreciated that. The other thing I want to tell you about is just give you a little reading of how she does the place. So not just New York, but also Jamaica. So just a couple of sentences. This is Vincent, 2 months since he's been in New York. He wondered if this unfriendliness was a byproduct of living in America, a disease that you caught. He hadn't seen it everywhere he went. He'd known so many Jamaicans who'd claimed family in Brooklyn over the years, so Vincent was surprised to find it filled with so many white people. They were everywhere, and they all seemed determined not to meet his eye. So he became determined not to meet theirs either. And he was disappointed that America passed this reticence back and forth like a contagion. So, engrossing portrait of a family and individuals caught in the sweep of history and slavery and migration, yet there's also the personal drama of love lost, infidelity, and regret. These Ghosts Are Family by Maisy Card.
Very good.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah, can I say a reader?
Read alike?
Yeah.
You got to read alike for us, sure.
Yeah. Homegoing by Jessie. It has the multiple perspectives. She doesn't jump so much back and forth in time, but it has from the ancestors to the present day. It's international, multicultural migration. So I think it's a really good read alike.
Yeah, I would also say Girl, Woman, Other to a certain extent, which is the latest Booker Prize winner. By Bernardine Evaristo. So, and with that, we seem to be out of time, and we will just encourage you to come by the library, pick up a list, and
oh, excuse me, I think one thing that you didn't mention at the beginning was our lists are also all on our website.
They are all on the website. Thank you.
You can also check them out there.
So that's wakefieldlibrary.org, and you can find the list there. If you have any questions, you can't find a book that you're looking for, please come to the reference desk and ask a librarian, and we can find it for you anywhere, anytime. That's what we do. That's what we love to do. And other than that, I think we will see you next month for another regular session of Beebe Book Buzz.